Hello there and welcome back to the reading room. And I am Mark Reid. We are doing another episode of Proofread with one of my favorite people on the internet, apparently Dr. Ember, which I think is it's a throwback to the Kent Hovind review that we were doing. I think the last time you were in here, you were also a proud and distinguished doctor of Patriot University, I believe. So Ember, my darling, how are you? You look fantastic as always.
Well, thank you. I threw this on in 5 minutes because there's never enough time anymore. It's been a rough week, I gotta say.
Yes, absolutely, and sort of the week. Obviously, the elephant of the room is the huge election in the US. I must admit I was avoiding it completely. I have been checked out. I didn't do an election stream. I refused to do an election stream. I did not want to immerse myself in that. Feelings after the whole thing? Do you have feelings about the whole thing?
Oh yes. Mostly terror, strong panic. Actually, it's starting to get better because I've been planning, and that lets me exert some control over my own life and feel like I have a say in what's happening and whatnot. But I'm getting more anger than straight up fear, but and frustration too, because there's people all over the place thinking all kinds of things. And I mean, we've been seeing people in the community sharing crisis hotline phone numbers because so many people are so upset. And fair. But in order to calm those people down, there's other people running around going, oh, nothing bad is going to happen. The president will just have an orange face, but nothing will change. Meanwhile, attacks have already started. The social contract is already unraveling. And as upset as I am about that, and as terrified as I am about that, these people over here who are trying to gaslight everyone into pacifity, which is a word now, I swear, they're pissing me off. So I'm like, I'm angry at these people, and I'm angry at these people, and everything is on fire.
I think that some people are sort of, optimism is good, but there's sort of optimism to the point of denying, things. I don't see how things aren't going to change, because even if Trump was just using trans people as a means to get into the White House, the people with him, the Project 2025 people who are with him, absolutely were not. They are a serious bunch. I think it's going to be a real test of the democracy's sort of its ability to preserve rights.
It's done. That's over. We're done with that.
I think it's going to be a hard battle to maintain those rights through what's happening, but I think
we can't. It is. I'm not exaggerating. It is over. That we're done with that, because the whole thing that maintained our system of rights was the checks and balances. We don't have those now. The Senate belongs to the new dictator. The House belongs to the new dictator. The Supreme Court belongs to the new dictator. There is nothing to check his power. So we're done with the Constitution now. It's I know it sounds hyperbolic, but any rights we retain are at the monarch's pleasure.
Well, he hasn't taken control of it yet. I mean, he said that, Project 2025, and don't get me wrong, that outlines exactly what he wants to do. I totally get that. But there's still the some checks on power in there. The House can still have some effect on the president, kind of thing,
if they want to.
Absolutely,
that's a big if though.
Yeah, no, I get that. I really do. It's just I don't think everything will be fine, but I think that there'll be at least some people in these institutions that will be trying to stop the unfettered access of power that he quite obviously craves. And I guess what I'm saying is we have to support those people try to give them the weight of the vox populi, essentially the voice of the people. But yeah, it is incredibly disheartening and horrible. So what's your biggest fear now? Like what is it that stands out to you as the thing that's going to that you're most concerned about going into the new paradigm, I guess, this new era of?
There's a lot. I don't know what to put at the top of that crap heap. I just off the top of my head, I'm going to say the breakdown in the rule of law, because we're already seeing that. That doesn't have to wait for January 20th. There's people running around who are already attacking women, saying your body, my choice. And they know there's no consequences because the prosecutors are already dropping cases because they know they won't ever get to prosecute them because the offenders will get pardoned as of January 20th. So there's no point. So we no longer have laws effectively in certain circumstances. And that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah. And so do you think most people, there's sort of this miscoloration of the trans issues? I've experienced it myself, people saying that, trans people are perverts and things like that. What do you think is the biggest one as far as trans is concerned? And do you think these people, they have any kind of nefarious intent, or do you think it's just misinformation? Have they just drunk the Kool-Aid? Because I don't understand where this comes from.
It's a mixture of a whole bunch of things. A lot of people have been using us as a political pawn, a scapegoat, projection, so that the proletariat is looking at us instead of where the actual predators are, in the Republican Party, in the churches, in the church schools, all of these things. But that's only part of it. There's also people who, just like with any other minority group, legitimately hate members of that minority group and want them eradicated. I'm looking at Michael Knowles, for example. And then there's people who are just going to go along for the ride, and then there's people who just want to hurt anybody they're allowed to hurt. And it's a big mishmash. I mean, yes, there's people wearing the red hats who don't hate trans people, or they love gay people but think trans people need mental help or something. But holy shit, there's a lot of people who only it's just politics, it's nothing personal, but they'll go along with it when it gets personal. And then there's people who it's very personal, and the politics is just a means to the end of getting what they want.
Why? So this whole idea that they're going to be looking in the wrong places. I was looking at some statistics last night after somebody had told me, they're the trans people are doing this or the trans people are doing that, and I found that the person most likely to abuse a child is actually a white cis male who is a friend of the family or somebody close to the family, like not the stranger that you think it is. And so why do you think it is that the statistics, the studies, the actual scientific documentation, why do you think it is that doesn't seem to matter anymore or I guess never did matter? Why doesn't that matter to these people?
Well, there's a lot of factors. Partly it's our education system. Our political powers that be have been undermining our education system for decades. And it's showing, like looking at the voters, for example, the majority of voters had no idea about anything that was going on. They didn't know about Trump's lies. They didn't know about Harris's plans. They didn't even know about Trump's convictions. They just saw two names because they've not been paying any attention to anything at all.
Right.
And that's sort of the culture in the U.S. When you start bringing out facts and data, people tune out, turn off, they go watch another cat video. At least many people, obviously not everyone, but
Yeah.
it's on top of that, there's that internet debate bro culture. The people who do very much care about facts and studies and whatnot, because that comprises the majority of the pieces on their chessboards for their matches against their opponents. But even though they're often good at getting information out, a lot of people have started to ignore that because to them, the debate culture is the new Jerry Springer show. And they're like, it's just two people fighting, and they're not paying attention to the information. They don't even watch if they're not in the mood for it.
Yeah.
And, you know, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, all of these types who spend all their time debating 18-year-olds have done their level best to diminish the credibility of that kind of discourse.
Yeah, I have noticed like it's really turned into a you know, garbage fire centric kind of you know, environment, and it really concerns me. The whole idea of having intelligent discourse seems to be you know, thrown on the wayside. Do you feel that way as well? Like it just, you know?
Yeah, hugely. The anti-intellectualism is itself a powerful movement. And all the pseudoscientists have wrapped themselves up in this. You know, the anti-vaxxers are like, oh, you believe experts like Fauci on you know, healthcare, or oh, you believe the evolutionists instead of, you know, Ken Ham, and just all the stuff, all the things they're pushing in every domain they're pushing it. They're anti-expert, they're anti-education, they're anti-knowing they're pro-ignorance. That's their whole thing, is they're pro-ignorance, and proudly so. And even if you're only a member of one group, if you're only a young earth creationist, or you're only an anti-vaxxer, or whatever your pseudoscience of choice may be, you're still getting a consistent message across the board that the people who know what they're talking about should be actively ignored.
Do you think that's the biggest problem in our society today, that the people that we have entrusted to basically have the knowledge of all of these fields, like they're just being ignored as if they are just somebody on the street with an opinion? Do you think that that's... How do we get people to understand just how important it is that, you know, the person who has studied all of this is the person we're going to for that information? How do we get that across to people?
I don't have a really good way. The best I found so far is case by case. You know, you have to talk to a person, meet them on their level, meet them where they're at, and say something like, listen, if you have a clog in your bathroom, maybe you can snake that out yourself. But if your plumbing completely just explodes out of the wall, you're going to call a plumber because they're the expert. They know how this shit works. When you need a tooth pulled, you call a dentist. When you need your engine repaired, you call a mechanic. There's a reason we have experts, and that applies to all the other things there are experts in. They study this shit, and yeah, sometimes doctors fuck up, sometimes mechanics fuck up, but you have a lot better chance of getting things fixed when you talk to people who know what they're doing.
Well, it seems like a whole bunch of people have stepped in, sort of, you know, a bunch of, I mean, I hesitate to say, but sort of snake oil salesmen who have stepped in and said, well, I can work as a doctor kind of thing. You know, there's no reason why, you know, we've got all these courses on, you know, things like astronomy and, you know, critical race theory and stuff. But, you know, I'm a pastor of a church and I decide I'm an authority on it. It's just kind of odd that you wouldn't accept that for someone treating your car or you know, pulling a tooth kind of thing. You'd go, no, I want a credentialed person. But for these other matters that are, so, I think maybe even more important, they will go to some random guy off the internet. And I don't understand that mentality.
So there's a lot of factors. Everything is complicated. Nothing has one single cause, as much as we might wish there would be. But there is a principle from like the late 80s, early 90s, when I first came across it anyway. In any debate or discourse or whatever, people, generally speaking, broad brushing, people don't actually listen to the arguments being made. They evaluate the emotionally evaluate the people, and whoever they like best, they wind up agreeing with, regardless of the merits or flaws in their argument. And then they post hoc justify why they thought that person won. But it's just rationalization on top of the emotional, non-logical conclusion they already came to.
Mm. And so if you were sort of having a conversation with somebody who is on this camp of, well, you know, you're harming the children, or you're doing all of these horrible things, or you're confused, or you're mentally ill, or one of those, what would you say to them? Like, how do you even begin that conversation? How would you approach that? But what would you like them to know? Sorry, I'm asking two questions in one kind of thing. But number one is how you'd approach it, but two is, what would you like them to like really absorb and know from your lived experience?
Well, it depends on the context of the situation, because a lot of times when people come at you with those kinds of things, it's bad faith. They have no intention of engaging or learning or it's just bad faith. And you're never going to change a person like that's mind, because they're not there to have their mind changed. They're there for clicks or drama or whatever. They're just trolling to waste your time. Who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
So there's no point in engaging with those people. We've all got better shit to do with our time.
Yeah.
If it's a person who is genuinely curious, then depending on the question, you can present the relevant information. There's so many different questions though, so it depends on which one and how it goes off and all of that stuff.
Clicks and drama. I guess it's always been a thing in YouTube. What are your thoughts on that? Sort of the idea that it is the most trashy and horrible stuff that gets the views. And what's your thoughts on that?
It seems to be true. Generally speaking, yeah, people are aware that there's things to learn on the YouTubes. There's how-to videos, there's tutorial videos, there's great courses videos. You can learn a bunch of shit. There's TED Talks, wonderful things. But the channels that get the most views are entertainment. Mr. Beast, the biggest fucking YouTuber, because there's always an adventure. We're going to go to the other side of the planet and trap 100 people in a cage and see who cries last. You know, whatever the case may be.
Right.
Drama, human interaction, all that sorts of stuff. The science-based channels with the highest views. I'm thinking of like Professor Dave.
Yeah.
He understands. He figured out a long time ago. His early videos, purely educational, and they did okay. But when he started throwing in the snark and dunking on the pseudoscience, his views went way, way up. So now he can educate and entertain, and he's become one of the bigger YouTubers. Like, not just in the science sphere, but on the whole fucking platform.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So how much do we snark? How much do we you know, sort of dunk on these people? How much does that alienate them? Should we be doing that? Is that something that we should be doing?
Well, there's pluses and minuses to that. You know, some people are going to feel offended, feel alienated, and their brains will just close right up and they'll go home. But there's other people. We see it as a strategy on the anti-intellectual side a lot. If you mock someone, point out that their beliefs are silly, and believing those things makes them look kind of dumb, some people actually are persuaded by that. That's not my favorite mechanism of persuasion, but it's undeniably effective. But only with some people.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But do you think having a bigger audience will allow you to reach people, much more people? Do you think that's something we should be sort of keeping in mind, that if we're not successful, then our message gets lost in the mix? Should we should I mean it's kind of easy to dunk on some of these people, and it is incredibly popular to do so, to absolutely make them look like idiots, because it is possible. It's actually pretty easy to. Should we be doing that? Yeah, and I've usually taken a tact of, well, I try to be as sort of gracious as I can under the circumstances, like under very difficult circumstances sometimes. But should we be dunking on people? Should we be absolutely making them look like idiots? Is that a good thing? I guess my question is, where does making your channel grow and being able to reach more people outweigh the harm that you're causing to that one person who is probably going to double down? Let's face it.
It does happen often. Well, like with so many things, it's min-maxing doesn't really work all that well. Like, we've got Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh, who've gone all in on building the audience at the expense of the quality of the message. And then we've got people who are heavily invested in the quality of the message and have a very hard time reaching anyone. A balance seems to be key. I think one of the best examples is Erica at Guts at Gibbon, because she's got silliness, sassiness, snark, and science. And she's got just the right mix that she can make these 4-hour videos that people watch every minute of. And it's informative. She's not too mean, but she gets a little spicy sometimes. And it's very entertaining, very educational, and very hard-hitting when she tries to target ideas, not so much people. You have to really piss her off to make her go after you specifically and say, this is a bad person. Like Ken Ham, for example.
Or Donnie from Standing for Truth. I think she went after our good friend Donnie from the ironically named Standing for Truth at one point.
Yeah, she's not been too happy with Donnie from time to time.
Haven't we all?
It's true. It's true.
So, who do you think the worst person is for misinformation out there? Like, who's the very worst that you would say? I mean, I know that's a long line of that's a very long list, but who do you think's the worst?
Trump.
Yeah.
The man is made of misinformation, malinformation, or just wrong information, not to mention straight up lies.
Yeah.
But also, he gets credit for empowering his entire army of liars and incompetent fools. For example, J.D. Vance, who brought up the made-up story of people eating pets in Springfield. And as he said on the news, if you people in the media aren't going to talk about it, we're just going to make the stuff up. Because and he would not have a voice if not for Trump elevating him. So yeah, Trump gets credit for that too, I think.
And credit for a lot of things, and I think that's sort of one thing that we've got to focus on. Whatever happens over the next 4 years is Trump's fault. Whatever happens, you can't just say, because something I've noticed is, when Trump sort of says, oh, well, this happened in my thing, it's never his fault, right? It's never his fault.
Yeah.
Everything that happens now is Trump's fault. So I wanna, do you think it's a good idea to tell people just remember, you wanted this man and he's responsible now for the entire country, whatever happens.
Yeah, it's that. Like that's sadly that's already starting. Like I mentioned, the people running around who are taking the grape culture stuff off of the anonymous internet and into real life. There's been an incident here in my hometown today where college kids were harassing women, some of whom were Trump voters, saying "your body, my choice," and they're. It could have gone very badly if they hadn't been doing it in the middle of a shopping store.
Right.
And all you can do is say, this is what you signed up for. You asked for this. You wanted this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm never one to say blame the victim, but in this case, yeah, this was on the this is what you get, and you opted in for that. What can we do?
Yeah, a lot of people have had different ideas of what has caused this, what who's to blame for all of this. I don't even know where to begin. Do you have any thoughts on it, or is it just unfathomable? We can't. People are blaming all kinds of stuff. I have no idea.
As with a lot of things, there's multiple factors. Like ultimately, it's the same bullshit that we see in the debates that we do, like we've discussed before. Flat Earth, for example. The flat earthers don't actually care about the shape of the planet, but as long as we're arguing over the shape of the planet, we're not discussing what they believe and why. It's a Bailey to keep us away from their mutt of what their beliefs actually are. Right. And it's the same sort of thing. All the crap that Trump and his proxies have been throwing out, it's all distractions. He never actually gave a shit about trans people. He just saw it as a tool to win an election with. Now he's committed to put us in death camps, but he didn't actually care,
Yeah. I don't think he particularly cared either. I don't think he particularly cares about immigrants. I just think he is using that. And as I've said, the parallels to World War II or pre-World War II Germany, you find a group of vulnerable individuals and you make them into the cause of the ills of the entire society. I don't know what attacking trans people is going to do to fix the economy, but some people think it's linked for some reason, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, they're very susceptible to distraction, again, because our educational system has been undermined. It's not even just the past 50 years. Like, we can look back at educational videos from the 1950s, which, according to many of them, is the time when America was officially great, apparently, and they were teaching critical thinking in schools. They were teaching propaganda in schools. They were teaching rhetoric in schools. We didn't have those even 30 years later. When I went through school in the 80s, none of those things. That had already been gutted from our education system. And we see the results. No critical thinking, no understanding of propaganda, no knowledge that rhetoric is even a thing. And it's wild to me. And yeah, this is what we get. People who are, as we often say, people who have their critical thinking capabilities disabled become vulnerable to all sorts of wild bullshit.
Yeah. It must be very hard for you to be seen and be an advocate. How sort of or a representative of your community at the moment. How hard has it been for you over this time that you've been an advocate for or a representative of the trans community? Is it something that you went into gladly or something that you really had doubts about? How hard has it been to be a representative of a marginalized group?
Well, it's evolved over time. When I first started, the reason I started doing it publicly was because, as I've mentioned before, I didn't actually care if I lived or died at that point. I was like, you know what? We may as well use my experience for science. Maybe people will learn something. And for the same reason, I'm, a public atheist advocate. So other people see that they're not alone. I'm like, I can do some good with this. As it's proceeded along, I actually kind of quite enjoy being alive now. I like being me. It feels good to be me now, and I'd like to keep doing it. So now there's sort of mixed feels. Like it wasn't so bad when it was just assholes on the internet that I had to fight off. Bigots being bigoted, I can dunk on them with studies and science and facts and medical consensus, all the things. But now that they're coming offline and they have political power behind them, it's kind of terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only imagine. I can't imagine it's very strange being in another country and seeing this unfold, especially a country that has a tendency to follow the country that it's happening in. It sort of makes me question things as well. What's your favorite thing about your womanhood? What do you find to be the most wonderful thing that you've experienced?
Oh, I love that question because it puts the focus on something positive. Thank you so much for that.
Well, you were saying you're so happy now, and I'm just wondering, like, what, I think it's affirming to look at what it is that we find in ourselves that we absolutely adore, kind of thing. And your identity is a woman. I don't see you any differently. What is it about that that's the most affirming for you?
Well, those are sort of two separate things.
Okay.
There's a lot of different things that make me happy. Like, I like the fact that I can wear clothes that I feel good about now instead of just the clothes I'm supposed to wear. I like the fact that I can, decorate my face with makeup. That's a thing I've always wanted to do since I was little, and I was never allowed to do, really. Now, granted, I'm not that decorated right now because I just left work, unfortunately. But it's a fun thing.
Mhm.
I like how my voice has been sounding lately. I'm still not where I want to be, but instead of getting a sense of dread and ick and horror from my voice, it gives me happiness now. I'm
Feels
getting
more like
there.
you. It feels more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Okay. No, I
probably
get you.
the biggest single thing is that it feels good to be in my own skin. I didn't even realize that was possible. I just felt really uncomfortable. But now, like, it's hard to describe because I can't put it
Right.
into words I would have understood before my transition, but my skin feels different on the inside. It's like warm. It feels like a big hug everywhere. I don't know. It defies description. But it was a thing I never expected. I mean, is it do most people feel that all the time? Are you supposed to feel good about being inside your skin? I don't. If you do, I am so envious because I went 44 fucking years without feeling that.
I don't know. I feel comfortable in who I am, I guess, but I don't know. There's certain things about me that I don't know. I have second guesses about, or I think we all have those moments of, what the hell am I? Have this part of my either personality or I don't think it's particularly good to ask somebody who's neurotypical, not neurotypical, like whether they feel comfortable in their own skin. I'm not even sure what that would mean. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me, what's it like being neurodiverse? And I'm sort of like, what's it like being normal? I don't know how to talk about that. Like it's sort of, yeah, but it is wonderful that you've experienced sort of both sides of things, that you've experienced sort of how you feel while being cis and while how you feel while being trans. I don't know. I can never experience that because I feel comfortable as the gender I was born with. So but I can only pass it in terms of, well, what have I been uncomfortable about, and what has like really annoyed me. I can say that your hat game has been amazing, and I do find myself, and this is the truth, I find myself wishing that I had like just a tiny fraction of the fashion sense that you do. I really wish I had that because
You say, well, I'm wearing my frumpiest of all dresses because I
look,
just threw one thing on.
the colors nice. It goes with the colors of the hat, and I can tell that, like it I am fashionably challenged, and I make no hesitation in saying that. I pick the worst stuff. I literally I go for blacks and grays and like dark blues because I cannot match colors. And I just wish I had your fashion sense. And I don't know. I like going shopping with my wife because she has much more fashion sense than I do, and we can like talk about it. Is shopping something that you enjoy now? Is that something that you sort of hated? But
exactly, I hated shopping before. It was so boring, so rote, a thing you have to do and get done as quickly as possible.
Right.
The only exception was the technology section. Like,
right, yeah.
When I was little and I had to go shopping with my parents, if they had a section with like adapters and cords and USBs and shit, boop, I just spend the whole time there. You know?
Yeah.
Let me play with the gizmos. But now it's marvelous. I get excited over fucking clothes. I'll see a sweater, I'll be like, oh, it's so cute. It's actually, I was getting mad about that yesterday. I was doing my grocery shopping, and there's a new selection of clothes on the clearance rack, as happens every month, and I'm poor, so I shop off the clearance rack. And I couldn't, because we're having a bit of a situation here in the US, and I need to be ready to leave in a hurry. And so I need to keep my money liquid. I can't go buying new stuff, even if it's on the clearance rack. And B, even if I did buy something, then I either have to bring it with me or leave it behind. And neither is a good option. So now I'm mad because I can't buy fucking clothes because I have to be prepared to fucking run. What the fuck?
It's madness. It's madness. I wanted to get it out of the depressing sort of, state of America at the moment, but I understand. Yeah,
it's inescapable. But yeah, overall, I there's so many things that are so different now. I do enjoy shopping. I get excited over things. I feel my emotions more. The way I think has shifted. Things are just so much fucking better. So much better. It's unreal. Like, people say the whole reason for transition is to alleviate gender dysphoria. And yes, that's true. It helps. Yeah. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because the euphoria you get from living the way your brain is set up to live is so much better than you could ever fucking imagine.
I don't think I can. I think that unless you have actually lived that experience, you can't sort of know what it's like. You just can't. I don't know how. I guess it would be like if I was forced to live as a woman and go shopping for makeup and buy dresses and things like that, which I don't want to do. I don't want to do that. Like I really don't want to do that. And you've now been introduced to the sort of what I have sometimes said is the financial inequality of women's products and things. What are your feelings about that? So makeup's like I found out how expensive makeup is, and I was blown away. It is so expensive, and dresses are usually much more expensive than men's clothes, like insanely more expensive. Shoes are more expensive, even though that they may be of a similar design. I'm wondering how have you sort of acclimatized yourself to that?
I haven't really. Like I said, I've been poor this entire time, so I'm basically shopping thrift stores, clearance racks, the occasional internet sale. I've only paid full price for one article of clothing, and it was the Halloween dress that I wore when Bree was over on my channel.
Yeah.
Because Bree was like, we have to dress up as witches. So I'm like, okay, cool, we could do that. So I got, that was the only dress I paid full price for. For the most part, I dodge that particular expense. There are some things that you just can't, though, like makeup.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I get the less expensive makeup, but it still costs more than not buying makeup.
Yeah. I actually adore my wife because she doesn't wear much makeup at all. She really just goes, nope, not doing it. And I do admire anybody that sort of fights against social expectation like that. You know, I really do. I'm thinking now, sort of, how have you? So, if people don't know, you work as well as a truck driver. How have the people in your industry, the people that you've sort of interacted with, the people in the office or whoever is managing the things, how have they treated you?
It's complicated.
Well, if you don't want to talk about anything, please do let me know. I don't want to push you into talking about anything you don't want to talk about.
Oh, it's all right. For the most part, my company has been supportive. There've been a couple people have made mistakes or whatever, and like the operations manager at my terminal has been like aggressively supportive. Like, you know, she'll comment on my nails. She'll be like, "Oh my God, how did you do that? What did you do? I can't even do that." You know, that sort of thing. Because in this case, it's just divided nails. It's like it's the trans colors. It's pink on one side and blue on the other, and white in the middle. And then I've got like this shiny purple overcoat thing. Yeah. And so she's like, it never occurred to me to do that. I just bloop, my nails are one color. So she's been great. But on the other side of things, there's some of the places where I go, I actually had a little bit of a fun time the other day. One stop in particular, I'm not allowed to use the bathroom there. I'm the only person. Other drivers from other companies can use the bathroom. I can't.
Yes.
Because I'm a trans person. That's it, you know? And it's not because there's a policy specifically discriminating against me. It's because the company is afraid of what would happen because they're not sure their employees aren't violent. So, you know, to dodge liability, they just, you know, please don't kind of thing. And that's a problem. So there are employees. It is. It's like, why are you hiring people that you aren't sure aren't violent?
And
what are we doing here?
And why should you be the one to change your behavior so that people won't break the law and make you a victim? Like, this is sort of, you know, victim blaming on a whole new level. You're preemptively saying, well, if you go in there, we don't know what will happen and it's your fault.
Well, again, they weren't saying that I couldn't, just that they'd rather I didn't because I mean, I try to give them credit for good intentions, but that also does sound like a plausible excuse, you know? But the TLDR is there's people at that particular enterprise who very much do not approve of the fact I exist, which is kind of weird because the more time goes on, the more I pass. And, you know, sometimes my voice is better than others. Sometimes my makeup is better than others. So, you know, I'm still going through the laser process. So there's some times where my face looks not quite right because there's hairs poking through and shit. There's all kinds of things. But some days I fucking nail it everywhere I go. It's ma'am this and people smiling and it's the way people treat you night and day. But that's neither here nor there. Point is, some days I 100% pass. So I'm at this stop where there's people who know I'm trans and do not like me because of it. And then another driver from a different company who has no idea who I am or what's up with me comes in and starts unloading their trailer. And then one of the warehouse people comes along and says something snarky in my general direction. The other driver goes, "Why would you talk like that to a woman? What's wrong with you?" And I don't think it occurred to him that, he's cussing out a woman. He's just straight up being misogynistic in front of other people. It just never crossed his mind. And I found that kind of funny.
that is kind of really ironic. It's just, but because the impulse is to protect, women who are more vulnerable and, the weaker sex, I'm using that very liberally because the women I know are not weak, but I'm using that thing. But, the more vulnerable people in our society, they'll just absolutely dunk on it. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely horrible. But I find it incredibly objectionable that you're the one to blame if your company can't provide a safe working environment. That's completely unacceptable. I'm absolutely flabbergasted. Like, that would not fly over here. You can't, you don't go to your workplace and they say, hey, because you've got a certain skin color and people don't like that, you can't go to the bathrooms because they think that you shouldn't, be in there. Like, what kind of a world are we living in where it's like, well, their bigotry is going to, we've got to protect you from their bigotry by restricting you? That seems insane.
Mm-hmm. It does to me too. It pissed me off. It humiliated me when
Right.
they came and talked to me about it. It was a little overwhelming, and it still makes me pretty damn angry. I'm like, y'all realize that this is straight up discrimination,
Yeah, it absolutely
if a driver came in and said, oh, you can't use the bathroom because you're black, do you see how that would be a problem?
Yeah.
Now put it into this situation. What the fuck, guys?
Yeah, it is bigotry. And I think that having laws on the book where you can't discriminate for things like that. I mean, we've had, what people don't forget, what people sort of forget is we've had this for black people. And there were those people that said, hey, they don't deserve that place within our society. We've had it for gay people, and they say they don't deserve. Like, what would make this different? Why would these people not come out on the wrong side of history 20, 30 years from now when we look back on how we treat people and go, was that the right thing to do?
I still struggle to understand, because aside from the political bullshit, the indoctrination they've been getting from their side on this, I do not understand it. And I've asked people, the not the bad faith people, but like the confused people in the middle. I'm like, why do you think that? Like, you look at the first wave of feminism where they're like, women should have equality, but not black women. And then the second wave came along and said, okay, black women, but not lesbians. Like, you see how this was wrong every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
You understand that was wrong, and yet here you are doing the same thing to another group.
Yes.
Why? How do you justify that?
And it seems weird because we just sort of say, well, shouldn't we just all have the same sort of equality within? Aren't we equal stakeholders in this society? And it's like, oh, but yeah, of course we are, except these people. And I don't understand how we get to that kind of thing. Like, I don't understand why you don't see that down the line, you're going to be that really embarrassing uncle that still dislikes black people for being black, like that one that, you put into the corner and say, please don't say anything at this family, dinner, please.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm the kind of person who always tries to understand where the other person is coming from. Like, yeah, I was originally very pro-life. It seemed obvious to me we need to protect babies, right? And a part of it was the bullshit ideology that was being spread around by the talking heads, that there were people who were having abortions just because it was inconvenient for them to be pregnant. That was all I'd been exposed to, so that's what I believed. But I wanted to understand what the other side was thinking. So I'm like, why? Why is this? And they'd say, well, we're not out here like trying to kill all the babies. We're saying this is none of the government's business. This is an intensely personal decision between a woman and her physician, and the government needs to butt the fuck out.
Yes.
And I'm like, I hadn't thought of it that way. And that's a thing a lot of pro-life people miss, is that no one is saying kill all the babies. They're saying that the government needs to stay out of that decision. That's it.
And a lot of the
yeah,
time, this whole idea that it's just a well, I couldn't be bothered, or I don't, it's just inconvenient or whatever. I don't think that's the case from the people and the women that I've spoken to. Like, it probably was, if not the one of the most momentous and significant decisions of their entire life. Like, this whole idea that women are just taking it so lightly, whether they have a baby, like, it is that framing that is so wrong, because it's the amount of stress and worry and consideration and all of these things that they've thought about. It's not insignificant. And as I pointed out before, people die in childbirth.
mm-hmm. We're
You know,
seeing an increase in that now because,
yeah,
well, there's a number of different cases with a number of different reasons, but some of the ones that have been highlighted have been people actively having a miscarriage where the doctors are afraid to do anything because of the new draconian restrictions in their state.
Mm-hmm.
And so a person dies.
Yeah, and they're being framed as, well, it's being caused by the sort of abortion pills kind of thing that people have had to take instead. And the ones that I've investigated, it had nothing to do with those pills and more to do with the fact that they would have complications. But, because they weren't in a hospital or a clinic, they just died. And that's horrible. If they were in a clinic or in a professional place, they wouldn't have died.
Yeah, we were already having problems with maternal mortality and infant mortality and whatnot because of the way our healthcare system is set up, where if you can't pay, out you go. There's a few exceptions, there's a few workarounds, but there's a lot of people who just weren't going to hospitals because they couldn't afford it. There's people who aren't getting ambulance rides because they can't afford it. There are people who are literally dying of being poor. And that's affecting everything across the board, but especially acute situations like the baby is coming right now,
Yeah. And I have talked to people. It's so, I can't tell you how insane it sounds. And I don't mean to trivialize this, but when you're talking to somebody in America, and don't forget, I grew up in Australia, I had Australian friends, never really talked to anybody in America at all until I got to YouTube. And, you say, well, go see a doctor. And they say, well, I'm tossing up whether to go see a doctor or, cut back on my food for this month. And that blew me away. I cannot tell you how, and it just, the normalization of it, like, that's normal to people, that they toss up between healthcare and, being able to, go see a movie or something. Like, it blows my mind.
Yeah, the internet has made us very aware that that's not how most of the world lives, but only the people paying attention are aware of that.
Right.
A lot of people want to live in their own little bubble, and to a lot of people, they have the privilege to do that. They have employer-paid health care or whatever the case may be. They have a job that pays well enough that even with the inflation we've been seeing over the past few years, they can still comfortably afford what, to me, is a fucking mansion, multiple cars, RVs and snowmobiles and all the toys, and still have plenty of food and go do all the leisure things they want to do. But there's a lot of us who never had any of those things, Right. As you know, I was homeless for 8 fucking years.
Yeah.
And you just food, medicine, shelter, you can have one. Pick one, Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get out of that situation? What is it that because I think that somebody did a experiment where they basically, they were a millionaire, they had $1 million and they sold everything, basically went to starting from zero again to see if they could build back up to $1 million. And I think
they earned it.
Exactly. And they came in, and don't get me wrong, they did well. right? They managed to sort of, stay at people's places, then sort of afford stuff. And they got up to, but they came in like 990 something thousand short. He only made a few thousand in the time he was going to build.
Yeah, I think it was like 164,000, and that was leveraging all the networking connections that they'd made as a millionaire, which not everyone gets to do.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that sort of shows that, hey, it isn't about just, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing. You can't just, but what for you was it that sort of helped you get out of there, or what was the catalyst that enabled you to get out of that situation?
Well, because I'm feeling cheeky, a miracle.
Okay. It was a miracle. Okay, I'm astounded. Witness, Ember. Witness.
Absolutely. I could change. Oh shit! It's over there. My Pope, my Reverend of Atheism hat.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as with all great stories, there was this girl. I hadn't had feelings for anybody in years. I had long since given up the idea that there was anyone for me. And I was content just being myself. And then I met this girl who she was quirky, she's nerdy, she was into theater, she's fascinated by every kind of science. She was funny. She ran a fucking improv troupe. Like,
nice.
She was really cool. And I got feelings for her. But she's also poly. Now, I don't have a problem with poly. I'm poly myself. I think, it's a long conversation for another time, but I think that's the natural state of people. It's because of our own insecurities that we force ourselves to be monogamous. But like I said, separate discussion. But because she was poly, she already had several relationships going at the same time and had several breakups in quick succession. Right. So she just wasn't in a place to date somebody new. So I'm like, that's fine. Being friends is wonderful too. This is an amazing person. I want to be part of their life. So we're friends for a while. And we had a great time being friends. It was fabulous. And then one day I was out doing the photography thing. The moon was pretty. I went out to, I live next to one of the Great Lakes, and we have these cliffs that overlook the Great Lakes, and the moonrise was like right in the right place. So I went out and I did photos. And as I was finishing up, I was getting ready to pack up for the night. I started to put my camera away. The biggest, brightest shooting star I've ever seen shot right across the face of the moon. And without even thinking about it, I made a wish upon a shooting star that I wanted to be with her. And I packed up my stuff, went back to my car. As soon as my cell phone was back in signal range, halfway to the car, the phone rings, and it's her. And she says, another friend of ours and I are going to go to this karaoke thing. Do you want to come hang out? And this isn't an abnormal thing because we're friends, we hang out and just do friend things. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just leaving where I was doing photos. It's great. So we meet up, we do the karaoke thing. It's a nice time. Towards the end of the night, she says, hey, do you want to go for a walk? I'm like, sure, it's a lovely evening. So we go for a walk. And she says, and then she spills her guts that she's been into me for a month or more now. And she can't contain it anymore, and she really wants to get together with me and all of this stuff. And I'm like, holy shit, that was one powerful shooting star.
Yeah.
And so we got together. And obviously that didn't last because we're not together now. But while we were together, that other friend who came with us to karaoke happened to be her best friend and was quickly becoming one of my best friends. Well, he was dating a person from elsewhere in the state, and they wanted to get a place together. But even the two of them together couldn't afford a place. I was busy being homeless at the time, but I did have a job. I've been working nonstop for years. So they approached me and were like, hey, we want to get a place together. We know you need a place. Do you want to work with us? And between the three of us, we can afford a place.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened. It's a long series of step-by-step things that began with a miracle.
Well, I think that sort of, do you find visualizing goals to be helpful?
Sometimes. It's it depends on how specific the goal can be. Like something like the story I just described, where it was literally just the deepest wish of my heart.
Right.
Like there's nothing I can do to make that goal happen. You can't make a person want to be with you. You can't make
Right.
a person's friend be a friend with you and consider you to be a housemate and any of that sort of stuff. I don't know. Sometimes I think you can though. Like I'm so preoccupied with all this shit happening in this country and like making my escape plans and making sure the kids are going to be safe. Like I'm working with my oldest, who is also trans, to make sure they have their passport in case they need to go in a hurry. And I'm like, I'm so distracted by that I have a hard time thinking past the immediate crisis to stuff where visualization is actually helpful. I know it can be. I just can't think of an example off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, so I think that, and how are your kids handling it? How is your how are they handling it? Your daughter handling it?
It's mixed. My youngest is slightly worried because she's, you know, a cis lesbian, bisexual. I think technically she's pansexual because she's currently dating a trans man. So you know, she doesn't care about a person's plumbing, but who the person is. So I think that makes her pan. But because she's cis and is, you know, she's worried about where things are going, but she knows she's not in immediate danger. But she also already has her passport. She took she did a travel to Europe with her boyfriend this summer, so she's already got a passport and she's in better shape than most.
And she obviously, you know, she has loved ones or at least a partner who is trans, so you know it's got to affect her. It has to, you know.
It's ishy. My son is more worried about me and their oldest sibling, but it's kind of he's got a lot of shit going on himself too, because he's trying to get his own life in gear, and there's a lot of complicated hang-ups in his way, a lot of obstacles to overcome. And then of course my oldest is just straight up terrified because, you know, we're kind of on the border of the purge up in here. It's not great.
Yeah, I certainly can understand where they're coming from. Has it been different being a parent, like motherhood from sort of, you know, has motherhood been different than what you've experienced? Do you get to, is reveling in that nurturer role really fulfilling something for you?
I'm not too focused on the roles. Actually, when I started to go through the transition, my kids actually had the forethought and the conscientiousness to be like, so how do you want us to refer to you? Are you still dad? Are you parent? Are you what do you want to be called? And I hadn't thought about it. I'm like, I don't really know. It hadn't crossed my mind yet. I do find I like mother a little bit better because it's the correct gender, so it's slightly affirming, but it's not a big deal in and of itself. I do find I've always cooked for the kids when I have them over at my place, and it's not like it's a new thing I do because of the transition. But like sometimes I'll just take a minute and be like, I'm cooking for my child. Yeah, this tracks. This fits. It's stereotypical. It's not required as a part of gender performance.
Of course,
but it fits, you know?
I suppose I'm asking because I've not had kids and never will. So I just, you know, sort of, I was interested in sort of, but I suppose if you've always been a nurturing parent, you're still a nurturing parent, you know, there's nothing.
I'm the same person I was always the nurturing. In fact, when the kids were little, they would make me the Mother's Day cards because they never saw their mom, you know? Sometimes they'd make like, you know, you're both parents kind of thing.
Well, I have noticed that, I've known you while you've been transitioning, and there's no difference between the Ember before and the Ember now. It's just the things that you are now seem to just fit more than they did. But you're still kind, you're sensitive, you're intelligent. All of the things you were, you still are. Nothing much has changed in that respect. And it just seems like you're really enjoying wearing hats and enjoying the makeup tutorials and things, and it's absolutely fantastic.
I need to watch more of those. I really do. But yeah, the thing about gender is it's not about changing who you are. It's about changing how you move through the world so you feel better about how you interact with other people. It's almost entirely social. There are obviously physiological changes. There's body dysphoria is a thing, and I gotta say, I am really, really happy with what HRT has been doing. Like my skin feels good. It's smoother. It's softer. My body's been changing shape, and not just in the obvious ways. For example, I can get my fingers all the way around my wrist. I couldn't do that before. There's shape change stuff happening, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I can do that. Well, I think that I have to say that I have experienced a bit of well, I'm a man, I shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that. Can we talk a little about the expectations on men in our society, the damaging ways that those expectations play? I feel like the way that we're not supposed to feel, that you're supposed to be sort of removed from emotion, and sort of crying is bad, and feeling sorrow is bad, and it seems like anger is the only emotion that men are supposed to present with. Did you feel a lot of that coming out, and how has that changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because the situation before was an imposed gender role, not something I actually felt from myself. So I don't know how much that's changed, but it is something that always upset me. Like, you can't cry, you can't feel emotion, you're not allowed to be sad, you have to be the strong one, you have to man up, you have all of that bullshit. And I've always known that was bullshit, even for actual men. But since it was a little bit easier as a non-binary person to be allowed to express emotion when I was presenting NB. But since just starting my transition, not even getting to HRT yet, just being allowed to exist as how I feel I am made a huge difference, because I started to feel emotions again. Because I was allowed to feel emotions again. You know?
Well, I guess that's my point, really. I think that sort of, why aren't men allowed to feel emotions? And we sort of talk about men in crisis, and I do see that as well. I think that men are in crisis. I think that there's all these issues that the rates of sort of ending their lives and things like that is horrible. And don't get me wrong, it has to take a back burner to the incredibly vulnerable people, and the trans community, the people being marginalized and things like that. But I can't help but feel that this sort of lack of being able to express emotion is connected to that.
Oh, it definitely is. I mean, look at what happens when a person does engage in that radical act of feeling human emotion. The Matt Walshes and the other red hats, they come out and they'll be like, "Oh, man up! You're such a sissy. What are you, a woman now? Unless you are a woman, then you'll never be a woman." But that's neither here nor there. It's they literally bully you for showing emotion. It's a tool of control. It's the social conformity. It's the get in line and do as you're told. And yeah, some people are gonna die because of the misery that causes. They don't care. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a problem. It's a radical act to feel emotion while being male. And
Mm.
we do need to do stuff about that. I'm not sure what, I'm not sure how, because it isn't just capitalism. It isn't just patriarchy. Like
Right.
those are bad for different reasons, but you can have
Mm.
those without this toxic masculinity, which
Yeah.
hurts men as much as anyone else.
Mm.
It's something else entirely. It's sort of this sadomasochistic I suffered so you have to suffer too bullshit.
Right. Right.
And I'm not sure how to counter that aside from, a lot of therapy.
Yeah, I mean, I saw one of the Matt Walsh things where he said, "Oh, if my best friend turned to me and said I love you, he would just be awkward and uncomfortable." And I, I was like, "Well, why?" I mean, there's an honest expression of platonic love from your best friend. That would make me go all mushy and go, "Matt, I love you too," to my best friend, and I love my best friend. He's my best friend. He's my best mate in this world. Um, and I've told him before, and it's not been awkward. It's been two adult men expressing a bond between them, and I don't see, there's nothing horrible about it. It's a beautiful thing to have friends that close. I don't understand, um, and I think that sort of, you know, we're really going into a dark day where you know, men are going to be isolated. They're going to be unable to tell anybody when they're sad, or else they're going to be, just some sort of, like you say, they're just a woman kind of thing. Which I've never gotten that insult because I don't see what's wrong with women for a start.
Right.
Um,
And I
and
used to fire back on people on that one. I'd be like, "What? You don't like women? Are you gay? Because it's cool if you are. I am fine with gay people. I just kind of wonder if maybe you have a problem with gay people."
um,
it's pretty wild.
yeah, so one of the things that has occurred to me is in the modern world when we're sort of we're connected to each other via the internet, but where we seem to be apart, like we're sort of isolated. Um, Sort of people will need connection more and more with other people, and I suppose I really admire the community that you have built around you, and that I'm lucky enough to be part of, even though my being the person I am, I find it hard to be in social circles. I find it very difficult to adapt to social stuff. But your community is wonderful and supportive and just amazing. Did you intend to go out to build a community? Was that one of your sort of intentions, or is that just happened without your permission, or your you didn't make any allowance for it? It just happened around you.
um uh, uh, Kind of 50-50-ish. So my origin story on the internet I've told before, but to summarize here, um a ways back I found AXP, the Atheist Experience, through
Yep.
Forrest Valkai because science is cool. And
Yep.
and I was like, oh crap, there's a whole community of people who believe like me who are standing up to the theists that try to bully people like me. This is
Mhm.
amazing. And then Matt Dillahunty left and they put out a call for hosts. And I'm like, I I know how to do that. I have the equipment. I have the training. I
Yep.
have done very similar things for many, many years. I can help. And pre-transition, being helpful was like the only thing I got a sense of self-worth from. So I'm like, I can help. Let's do the
Yes.
thing. So I reached out to the ACA and I'm like, hey, I can help with this. And they were like, okay, cool. We need to see how you are on camera. So I started my channel sort of like an audition for the ACA so they could see how I
Wow.
was on
Okay.
camera. Yeah.
Nice.
And unfortunately nothing ever came of that. There was it's another long story, but TLDR, nothing ever came of that.
Mm.
But I kind of like stood up and represented, hey, you can be an atheist. You're not alone. You're not a fool for thinking this, despite what the ye old magic book of fables says.
Right.
You're allowed to do this, and you're not alone. And there are so many people who are standing up and saying that. Godless Engineer has been saying that for years. Stand up and use your voice. The Atheist Experience and other ACA shows have been around for years. Seth Andrews has been around for years. But there's still people who are just finding the internet, who don't have a community, and online community is hit or miss, because
Sure.
the chat community on AXP, there are all there's a lot of regulars, they talk to each other, but there's not like a connection with the hosts because they're busy taking calls and doing the show.
Yes.
And there's stuff like what you and I do, what Joe does, and a bunch of other people in our community where there is interaction with the community. And that was a thing that was lacking at the time, or at least I hadn't been able to find it. And I'm like, this sort of needs to be a thing. So that's kind of what I started aiming my channel towards. I mean, I was doing the debunking, the giving people the tools they need, because as I tell every nascent would-be creator who's thinking about throwing their head into the ring, do it. You have a unique perspective and experience that nobody else can replicate. And you're going to reach somebody with what you have to say that none of the rest of us are going to reach, because we don't have that unique experience that lets you connect.
Yep.
And, in my case, my experiences and perspectives are sort of esoteric, little bit niche, because I come from a very odd background. I've got multiple science degrees. I am an ordained minister. I'm a Navy veteran. And I'm trans. Like, there's a lot of unique things about me all rolled up into one very strange individual. So, yeah, I like to think I offer some very unique perspectives.
I don't see you as strange. Why would you be strange?
Well, remember, I'm from the United States, where having an associate's degree makes you a nerd in the bad way. You're educated. How dare you? That sort of thing.
You're part of the intelligentsia kind of thing.
I wish.
Yeah. You're
Give me an ivory tower.
You're obviously a paid NASA shill. Don't lie, Dr. Ember. I know.
That would be so nice.
That would be great. Yeah. So this sort of was you. Essentially, it sounds like you just experimented with this platform, seeing what you could do in order to get a job somewhere else, but they never came through, and you just rolled with it. Essentially, that's what you did.
Yeah, kind of. Shortly after I started, I decided to take a run at I'd been, like I mentioned in my earlier story, I'd been doing photography for a long time. I'd been winning awards. I'd been getting jobs. Things were going fairly well. But because I was working all the time, because I've been a truck driver for a while, and we have very long hours, there's no way around that.
Yeah.
I felt that was holding me back. So I said, you know what? I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to go for it and try to make this my full-time thing. And in addition to award-winning photography, I also had some unique videography stuff going on. I invented a mechanism for capturing live events in virtual reality.
Wow.
So that a person could go, say I do your wedding, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just video on a screen.
Right.
You can step into the moment. I will set up the capture device on a seat in front of the ceremony. So later on, a person who puts on the headset is effectively in that seat. They're going back in time, and they're there. All the way, you can turn around and see Uncle Leroy picking his nose. You can look and see an airplane going. You're there. Aside from the smell,
incredible.
Which it's so cool. Sadly, even though, and I made it so that you don't even need a headset. It's best in a headset, but you can do it with a phone. There's a lot of different 360 videos. You can use your phone. You can just move it around, and it's like a little window. It's not the same as a headset, but it's pretty cool. Or you can view it on your computer, and you can scroll around. You can any smart device these days. You can do it with.
What kind of photography were you involved with? Like, what kind of photography did you do? Is it mostly landscapes, or are you doing portraits kind of thing?
Originally landscapes, and that came from truck driving, coincidentally. I used to write a
Sure. Yeah, no, I
lot.
can understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote stories. I wrote a novel. I wrote shit tons of articles. And
Yeah.
I was good at it too. I was published in the Chicago Tribune, the San Francisco
Mhm.
Chronicle, USA Today. I was a pretty good writer. But when the kid's other parent and I split, I needed a job that came with a house. So I had
Right.
to be a truck driver
Mhm.
because it came with a bed. And I felt so stunted creatively because I couldn't write anymore. You cannot write as a truck
Yeah.
driver because,
Yeah.
especially when you're in training, because the truck is always moving.
Mhm.
So it's just not viable. So some of my friends online were saying, I would love to see the cool places that you're going and the sites you're seeing. I'm like,
Mm.
why don't I take pictures? So that's how I started getting into landscapes. Now, when
Yeah.
I was really little, I was very much into photography, so I already had a head start. That's actually what
Yeah,
got me
yeah.
into physics, was my love of photography,
Oh, okay.
learning optics and shit.
Mhm.
That was my avenue into physics. Started with landscapes, but after I started a local job and I was back in the area, people were like, "Hey, you're a photographer. Can you take my acting headshot or something?" And at
Right,
first I
right.
was like, "That's not really the kind of photography I do. I mostly do landscapes."
Mhm.
But nobody else in the area was doing it. So I'm like, okay, because I'm a perfectionist and I want to do things right, I decided to
Mhm.
learn. I found the best in the business, Peter Hurley. I learned from him. I bought his book. I studied. I got fucking good. But there's not that much market in the area either. Like,
Right,
we don't
right.
have Broadway or anything, which is why there's no photographers in the area who specialize in that. Whoops. But so that wasn't a viable business, but it did get me into the shooting people side of things. And a lot of what you learn from shooting headshots applies to
Mm.
general portraiture.
Right.
Not so much with the same kind of composition, but the way lighting works, it's the same inverse square law. Rembrandt
Mhm.
lighting is the same whether you're doing a close up on the face or you're doing the whole body shot.
Okay.
A bunch of stuff like that. And so I started doing like creative artistic shots, and that's when I started entering in the competitions and winning awards and such. And
Mhm.
yeah, so it built up from there, and I started to make the thing that made the most money was boudoir, actually. Weirdly enough, like
So,
you
sort of
can get the most from a wedding.
glamour shots kind of thing?
Yeah, sorta. It's how to describe it.
I don't know what
There.
boudoir shots are.
It
I mean, I
comes
know
from.
boudoir is a bedroom, but I don't.
Right. It's sort of like erotic, not necessarily nude, in fact rarely
Okay.
nude, but
Yes.
like yeah, like bedroom clothes, scantily clad kind of stuff.
Right, right.
It's often meant to entice one's partner or to
Yeah.
entice customers if you're in, that
Mhm.
space as a creator. It's fine. It's
Yeah.
whatever. You do make more on a wedding because it's a big event and it's like 12 hours a day kind of thing, and then hours and hours of processing afterwards. So you make more per sale on a wedding. But you're going to do maybe 12, maybe if you're super popular, 20 weddings a year. Whereas boudoir, you can do 4 of those a weekend. So long term, you're going to make more on boudoir. And so that was my big money. I made more at that than I did as a truck driver for a little while. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm going to give this a shot. I've got
Yeah.
the photography skills, the skills to pay the bills. I've got this unique video stuff in addition to regular video stuff. And yeah, so I wanted to give it a try. And that was my first year on YouTube. And in between shots, bookings, stuff I had to go do, I'd make videos. And that's why my first year I had
Yeah.
like 5 videos a week plus a live stream, because I
Mhm.
had the time to do that. I could put it in. Like I'd be rendering a wedding video and editing a YouTube video. And then when the,
Mhm.
the, the one was done, I'd render the other, and then I'd start doing Lightroom stuff on the wedding photos. And my computer was always cooking.
Right.
And it didn't work out super well, obviously. You put a solid year of effort into building up your YouTube, and it's not doing that great. So,
Well,
like I said, I'm esoteric. It's a very specific flavor of people enjoy me.
Well, I must admit, and here's something I wanna say. One of the real sort of YouTube channels that's caught my eye and has sort of made me go, oh, that is amazing. Is there's people that will just walk around and take photos of strangers, just go, hey, do you mind if I take your photo, kind of thing, on the street, of just people they find interesting. And I found it to be just I just feel like it's the most interesting and wonderful photos are not those who are traditionally beautiful, but rather people that are different, kind of thing. I think that we're all very beautiful in our own sort of way, and the shots that come out, they really bring out the beauty of their subjects, no matter what they, like an old woman or something, and it's just it's a gorgeous photo. And I love that. Would you ever consider doing something like that?
I don't know if I'd be able to like make the YouTube video series out of it. It sounds interesting, because one of my favorite things about doing portraiture is yes, you get to make the art. Yes, it's the most rewarding thing in the world is when you can take a person who has unconventional looks and low self-esteem because of it. And take a photo of them to show them how you see them and make them realize there's beauty in them too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on the receiving end of that. I did a boudoir session on the other end of the camera of maybe a month ago or something. And the photographer who did that one, gifted artist, I mean, I've known the guy for years. He's very, very good.
Yeah.
He made me fucking cry because it was the first time I'd ever felt like I could be beautiful. And that's such a powerful experience for people. It's remarkable. But also getting to know people, get to learn about people. Because, I mean, as a photographer, you're expected to say off-the-wall shit to make people laugh and smile and whatnot. So you're effectively allowed to ask any question you want,
Right. Well, I've sort of always thought, like, how do they see that shot? How do they? It's like, to me, it's as bewildering as somebody that sees a lump of marble and turns it into a sculpture. How do you see that within it? How do you find that? Or is it a case of, hey, sometimes you see something and you just can't bring it out? Or is it that that is there? And like, how often do you see something and go, oh, I know I can get that shot, and you get it? Like, how often does that happen?
Well, after you've been at it for a while, you can almost always get it. It might take one or two shots to get it just right, or three or four or five. But once the idea pops into your head, it's like an experienced painter, right? You see the canvas, you've got your paints, and it's just a matter of translating what's in your head onto the canvas. Except now you're doing it with a real person, and you're using light as the paint and the camera sensor as the canvas.
Right.
It's much like what you were saying about visualizing the sculpture inside the marble block. Once you learn how to see light, it just comes to you. It's the coolest thing.
Oh, that's wild. I must admit, I'm bad at. I guess I'm bad at visualizing stuff. I'm bad at visualizing objectives and goals. I think that ADHD kind of bites me right in the ass there. Like, it's hard to keep that, sort of thing in my head. I think that so that's one of your hobbies. Another one I know is astronomy. How did you, like, what got you into astronomy as well? What made you fall in love with the celestial bodies, essentially?
The actual celestial bodies, TBH. I just it's hard to trace back where an interest first springs from, because as a child you're interested in fucking everything, But I do recall many, many nights gazing up at the sky with wonder, knowing all these tiny little lights are other suns at vast distances. It just thinking about what's out there, what worlds there could be, or nebulas and comets and all sorts of cool stuff that's up there. But also, my favorite time of day was twilight because it was
Yeah.
odd. You know, like the world is dark, but the sky's still bright, and you get the pretty colors. And then as time moves on, the brightest stars start showing up, and then the sky gets a little darker and more stars show up. And like, because I love that moment, the stars that are part of that moment became part of the thing that I love, you know? So there's a whole, and watching the planets move across, like Jupiter and Venus are huge because they're so damn bright. But other planets as well, like, you know, Mars, it's dimmer, but it's so very red. You can always tell which one's Mars, you know? And like watching them move across the sky and sometimes go the wrong way, it was like seeing time in motion, like seeing the universe as a clock that we're on the hand of. We're experiencing the time. There's a whole bunch of things, impressions from early childhood that are all tied up in that. But also, there was the way I learn. Weirdly, I never learned much about how learning works, the psychology of learning, the neurology of learning.
Right.
But I do know that we all have sort of semi-idiosyncratic patterns of the ways we learn. And because of the way I learn, I was able to absorb facts. The more I was interested in something, the more facts would like a sponge or like a bear trap, never to escape kind of thing. And with space, I hit that requisite level of interest where everything that came near my brain permanently lodged in there, just forever. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they call that a mimetic memory or something, you know, one that will absorb just information upon information. And I am guilty of that. I think though, you know, I'm not sure about that. I was curious about everything as a child. I think I was a bit different. I had like various areas that I was very interested in, others that I you know, you couldn't force it in me with you know, anything. I don't know why. That's interesting. And so how do you feel about sort of the flat earthers? Do you feel like, you know, to me, it makes so much more sense that the sort of models that we have. And, you know, you mentioned dawn and dusk, twilight hours. I remember seeing, when I was very young, seeing the light shine up above the horizon, like at dusk, and going, oh, that makes sense. Like you know, globe model makes sense. And you were sort of saying about people like flat earthers, it's just you know, something to stop you from getting to their probably religious convictions is what you're alluding to. Do you think that they're actually sort of that at any point is it going to be put to bed? At any point is that going to stop being a thing?
It depends on where you want to draw the line. Like any crazy idea you can think of with 8 billion humans, somebody believes it. So like no idea ever is really gone.
Yeah,
but...
Bigfoot Jesus is in the chat. Thank you. Yeah.
That's right. So where do you draw the line between when an idea is effectively no longer a thing? I think in many ways it's already kind of toast, because like nobody except the flat earthers and the people who like to debate the flat earthers takes it seriously, you know? And in fact, we don't take it seriously either. It's just fun to dunk on them.
Right. And it's kind of weird because most people have no idea that people would even debate it. Like people, you know, the normal people off YouTube would go, people still believe in flat earth. They have no idea the movement even exists, much less.
Well, whether they believe in it, I mean, again, I'm sure there are people who do believe, because there's people who believe in everything you can think of. But the majority of flat earthers, I don't think they really do. Like, there's some of them we know don't believe, that they're just doing it either because they have this goal of they have to believe they have the special knowledge, and flat Earth is just the vehicle for them to do that, or
Yeah.
they just
Well,
want something super controversial to argue about to prove they're really good at arguing, like Austin Whitsitt, for example. You know, he's way too smart. He knows it's bullshit,
oh,
but
I
he thinks he's the smartest person in the room, and unfortunately he's usually right. So he to prove to himself how good at arguing he is, he argues for the most indefensible position he can think of, seems to work out to be flat Earth.
I think that Austin Winter just likes conning people and making money, to be honest with you. I don't think he's, trying to, maybe there is a little bit of narcissism in there that or a narcissistic sort of, trait that sort of says, hey, I've got to prove how smart I am. But I think he just makes a lot of money off doing what he does.
Does he make a lot of money at that?
He seems to. He's got a really nice set and everything. He obviously has a house, and you know what I mean. Like,
maybe I just always kind of assumed he had a day job too, but I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. It's very hard to tell people's intentions, and we never can tell. I don't like to assume, but yeah, he's one that, when he started using ChatGPT for his citations, I went, yeah, he doesn't believe it. He's making it up.
That was pretty. When I think it was MC Toon who busted him on that. Oh my goodness, that was hilarious.
I was in the audience, and I looked up the papers that he gave, and it just that they didn't lead to anywhere. Like, you'd put them into Google Scholar, and they just would bring up literally nothing. Like nothing even remotely connected, because it was just searching for the names. But of course, the algorithm had just gotten those names by putting them together from random papers about literally nothing. So. It was kind of like I was very confused, because they looked very convincing. They looked like real papers, but I couldn't find anything on them. So I was there in the audience when he did that. So, and I was in the audience saying, hey, I can't find these papers, so I was firsthand on that one. I don't think I saw MC Toon's rundown on it, if he did one.
I mean, it could well be it. I mean, it's probably happened multiple times, but it could very well be that MC Toon saw you pointing it out in the audience and went, I got to look into this. You could have sparked that. I don't know.
I don't know. I doubt it. I mean, whenever Flat Earthers sort of provide citations, we usually look them up. That's the thing. Or whenever anybody, that's the thing. It's sort of, I usually don't provide citations unless I've read like the entire paper, which is very difficult to do. Like reading a scientific paper. I remember getting Dr. Dan Cardinal's one talking about Stanford's. So if you're familiar with Stanford and his genetic entropy kind of stuff, like his
John Stanford, yeah.
John Stanford, sorry, yeah. And he sort of, Dr. Dan Cardinal has written a paper debunking all of it, and it was a really good paper. It was really good to read, but the math absolutely beyond me, and it was difficult because I had to look up what words meant, because we know what they mean to us colloquially, but they're not using them in that sense. They're using them in a biological sense. So I had to stop and do look them up and really try hard. And the problem is that people throw out stuff very quickly, and it takes a while to get, like, people will say, hey, I've got this paper supporting me. And I've gotten very good at going through them and trying to find out, does this actually say what you think it says? And the answer is usually no, not at all.
Yeah. Same thing with the young earthers, especially when they go hog wild on the anti-evolution thing. Yeah, Trojan sources galore, and it's kind of fun. It's like playing hide and seek, except when the person is like just standing out in the middle of the field.
Well, there was those laws of papers when the young Earth creationists quote papers. Like there were those laws that whenever they quote a paper, it either disagrees with them or like there was a series of laws, I think it was on Rational Wiki or something, and it was actually hilarious. Like, I mean, it is a joke to us, but like it really is accurate how often their own paper disagrees with them, or they've misrepresented it in some way, or they just haven't used it correctly at all. I could never see myself just throwing out a reference without reading it first, or at least the abstract, and the conclusion of the paper. I might not understand the entire maths and the methodology and how they got, because that can be dense, right? We're both familiar with that. But would you ever throw out a paper that you hadn't at least read the conclusions or the discussion of the paper?
That seems very unwise. I mean, when
That's
people
pretty
do
far
that, it tends to be embarrassing. Like Tim Pool, for example,
Right.
the Russian agent who worked for Tenet Media and made a shit ton of money making Russian propaganda in support of Trump. But that's not why I bring him up. It's because his whole thing, he runs several podcasts, and many of them, he will just like read a headline, get outraged over it, and then start reading the article, and the article says something different from what the headline might lead you to believe, and he gets like halfway through, and then he has to backtrack, and he won't finish the article because it's not going the way he wanted it to, and he'll just real quick move on to something else. It happens like so often. It's hilarious.
But at the same time, his followers don't seem to get what he is doing. I brought up my good friend, the Kirby guy, Joe Kirby, who is this preacher in England. How he
Off
basically
the Curb Ministries.
Off the curb, where he basically said in one video, I have to use bait to reel people in, so I will say all of this stuff. And it's like, wow, and his followers still are on board. And it's like, he just said to you that he lies to you and over exaggerates everything because he wants you to come to his ministry.
Yeah. They're honest about it. Like Ray Comfort has said multiple times, he lies to people for Jesus to get the money. Like that, yeah. They could, I mean, completely different thing, but a grift is a grift, and a pseudoscience conspiracy theory is a pseudoscience conspiracy theory, whatever the topic is. Chloe Cole. She said on public record, she gets paid $200,000 a month to go around the country lying about trans people. Like, yeah, it's the same bullshit, no matter what the thing is.
What do you think we should do about that? Should people be held accountable? Like, so, at an extreme end, we see Alex Jones, for instance. He basically had his entire life taken away. I mean, but I don't have any sympathy, because that life was built on lie after lie after lie after lie. But really, the reason why that happened was more to do with him, his actions in the legal system. Like, for instance, not giving the opposition all the evidence in discovery, for instance, and things like that, then the legal system actually held him accountable for lying. Do you think we need to have more of a restriction on when people say stuff that is untrue, they can be held accountable? And not just if you're uber rich and Elon Musk and can sue people left, right, and center, but I mean, some vehicle that people can say, hey, that is a lie in the public forum. You're not allowed to do that.
It's tricky because, we do care about free speech. We care about people having the ability to express what they genuinely believe. But on the flip side, we have to be like a news outlet who spreads information they know is false that does harm. They're open to liability for that. But when it's a private person, how do you demonstrate that they know when they know it's false, as opposed to when they earnestly believe? And that creates something of a difficulty. Like in Alex Jones's case, he knew the shit he was saying was false, and it did measurable harm. In a lot of court cases, you need to meet both criteria in order to get anywhere. And maybe it shouldn't be that way, but I'm not sure how we could do it better. I can agree
Yeah.
we should do it better. I'm just not sure how. I don't have a practical alternative to offer, you know?
Yeah, I just, and I'm certainly not saying that we should sort of take people's free speech away from them, kind of thing. I think that they should be able to say what they honestly think. I'm certainly not advocating for that, but I just sort of, to my mind, something like Fox News, which I think it doesn't deserve the title news. They have done studies which show that watching Fox News will actually make you more misinformed than if you didn't watch anything at all. Like, you actually get so incorrect information. And it seems like the only thing that's made them tell the truth is pending lawsuits from companies. But that's from companies. I'm wondering how, we the people moderate such a monster kind of thing when it seems hell bent on, actively telling the truth. And they hide behind the excuse that, well, it's entertainment. Should we have entertainment as being sort of, these sort of propagandistic stories that people believe are fact, because people believe that they're that Tucker Carlson is a news organization, for instance. He's part of, that's news, and he's always maintained he's an entertainer. It's not news.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think it becomes a little more obvious when you take a situation and you change the context into an analogous situation that rests in a different context. So, like, for example, free speech is like super sacrosanct, but if we change it to a different sort of thing, like free expression, same amendment in our Constitution, but it's treated a little bit differently. You can't wander around nude. You can't block an ambulance from getting somewhere for the sake of your protest. If what you're doing causes harm, you're not allowed to do that. You have freedom, but as soon as you cause harm, that's the limit. If we apply that same standard, like Owen Morgan often says, you're free to swing your fist however you like until you hit the tip of my nose. That's where your freedom ends. And it's the same sort of thing. So if we apply that to free speech, you can say whatever the fuck you want until it causes harm.
But don't you see, like, for instance, Fox really championed the war in Iraq, and they were non-stop running this thing of attacking Iraq, and I think that caused great harm. I'm trying to think of another company that would still be in business given the harm that they have done, like given the incredible harm that they've done.
Yeah, it's
Monsanto, maybe.
I don't even think Monsanto counts, because they've done some pretty evil stuff, but they've also done some good stuff, or at least stuff with good intentions. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It's tricky, but I'd see, like, we look at the classic news stations, right? Like CBS, for example. Yes, it's impossible to present information without creating some kind of bias on the way you present it, even. But, like, there's a big difference between the unintentional bias of trying to present information as neutrally as possible and deliberately putting a spin on it in order to present something that isn't actually true. Huge difference.
Yeah.
And so when you've got a traditional news organization that's, for the most part, just presenting the information, that's one thing. And then you've got another organization like Fox and some of the stuff that's even worse out there that will present a sliver of part of the information to make it easier to spin it. And then the rest of their broadcasts are referencing that earlier report and then adding analysis on top of it to tell you what to think about it. That's pretty clearly manipulative with the intent of doing harm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the op-eds, at least in papers, they're called op-eds. Like they're called sort of opinion pieces, kind of thing. Most papers, they'll call it opinion and have it you'll still get people cite them to you and say, hey, this is what they report. And it's like, no, that's somebody's opinion. But, at least they make it clear. And it's kind of, we're moving into sort of a post-news era where people just watch whoever they like on YouTube. And part of me says, so I guess to sort of tie it back into what we were talking about, it's sort of, well, if I want to present what is true, should I be looking to grow as big as possible in order to drown out, people like Matt Walsh and people like, these right-wing conservatives? Should we be looking to, attack them in the same way that they're attacking the truth?
It's a balancing act. If you put all your emphasis into getting big enough to be heard over loud voices like that, maybe you can achieve it, but are you going to be able to, okay, let me rephrase. Okay. There's John Scalzi put in one of his books, one of the best pieces of wisdom I've ever encountered. The plan is not the goal. The goal is the goal. Yeah. The plan is just how we get to the goal. So the plan, in this case, would be getting as big as possible in order to achieve some goal. Can you achieve that goal by being, whatever you have to do to get as big as possible? Okay, great. Now you have a huge channel, but maybe the only thing your channel is capable of reaching people about, the thing that made you big, is doing street photography of people. I mean, I'm sure that's fantastic. But if your goal is to spread awareness about politics and you wind up making street photography videos, you've accomplished your plan, but you're not accomplishing your goal.
Yeah.
You gotta keep your goal in focus, and getting as big as possible isn't necessarily going to do that, because it can force you down a certain niche. You're in service. You're chasing the content. You're chasing the clout. You're chasing the clicks. You're not accomplishing your goal.
Yeah, very wise. I always appreciate your input. That's very prescient, I think. I've just looked at the clock and realized that my hour-and-a-half interview is now going on like 10 minutes to 2 hours. So we're slightly over time, and I didn't notice.
That never happens when you and I get together.
I still have stuff that I do want to talk to you about. We haven't even covered atheism at all, and it's wild. Both of our shows are about atheism and things like that. And I love discussing morality and sort of philosophy stuff. You had a question just before we wrap it. You had a question on morality that I wanted to talk to you about as well before I forget. And let's go late. Screw it. If you're happy to, of course. I'm so sorry. I should ask you, Ember. Are you happy going way over?
Yeah, no worries. I actually, my first thing, I don't have to get up super early in the morning because I have my passport appointment, but that's not till 10 a.m. my time. So yeah.
Australia is lovely this time of year. I just want to put that out there. It's absolutely lovely this time of year. Just saying. Look, I wonder whether the rest of the world is going to have a refugee policy for people fleeing the United States because of discrimination.
They're working on it. There's already, so Canada already has some things in place for refugees from state sanctioned violence. Other countries, shoot, what channel was it? One of our friends' channel had a person from Amsterdam on who was talking about how the Netherlands is putting refugee protocols in place. The other countries are bracing for a flood of people leaving the U.S. We have no idea how many yet, because a lot of the people who need to flee, a lot of the people in the minority groups who are in the most danger, also tend to be the poorest. And you need a certain level of access to finances in order to be able to leave.
Yes, yeah. It's sort of a privileged spot. But I'm wondering how Americans would feel if other countries throughout the world actually have a refugee policy because they're discriminatory towards their people. It doesn't look good when a first world nation is, you're not part of, an empire anymore. We don't have that. It's the global village. Every country is sort of a member of this village, and you've got drunken Uncle Sam over there, just being an ass in the corner. Like, how do you think the rest of the village is going to look at you?
Right. Like we're used to thinking of like refugees being like from Syria because it's a fucking war zone.
Right.
Or, Yugoslavia, which is now broken up into many other countries, but that's another period where we got a whole bunch of refugees in Europe and here in the US.
Yeah.
To have like refugees from the United States, not a good look.
Yeah, and I would welcome anybody with open arms that is fleeing because they feel like their life is in danger, whether that be from the US or elsewhere. I really think that we've got to take care of people. And I know that Europe doesn't. And I had Deviant Outcast says Sweden too. She would kill me if I didn't mention that Sweden is an amazing country with amazing people.
It's true. Sweden is very high on the list. There's actually lists.
I haven't liked.
Yeah.
Swedish people are awesome. They're too organized, but incredibly awesome. They're great. So yeah. But yeah, you had a question for me on sort of morality and philosophy. Do you want to go over that, or do you want to save it for another time? It's really up to you. I really don't mind either way.
I can't remember the specific question. Do you?
I think it was to do with the is-ought distinction. You can't get an ought from an is in morality, and you sort of were saying that you didn't really get what that was, and that's Hume's distinction, that basically says that you can't get an ought from an is.
I know people say that, and I've heard people like try to talk through it and say, whenever a person tries to get an ought from an is, they're inserting an unspoken ought in there.
Yes.
For example, people have bills to pay, therefore, to be a responsible adult, you ought to pay your bills. That's a bad syllogism, but there's a hidden ought in there. I'm just coming up with this shit off the fly. But I think what I may have been getting at, and I could be mistaken because my brain is all over the place all the time, but I don't know that that's necessarily always the case. Like, it sounds like the sort of thing people say that sounds right, but we don't actually know it because it hasn't been demonstrated. Like, there isn't a proof, there isn't a syllogism saying that is always the case. We just assert that it is,
Yeah, I think it's more when you're talking about, well, I ought to go to work, for instance, there's this ought kind of thing. There's always an endless, sort of, why ought you go to work? Oh, because I don't want to, be in sort of, on the street or whatever, I don't want to be in debt, or I want to be able to pay my bills and things like that. That isn't the situation itself. So that isn't you going to work. That is you have employment. You basically saying, well, I ought to do that because of this other reason. It isn't because you have the job and you have to work. That isn't the reason why you're doing it, and it never is. The situation itself never presents us with the choice kind of thing. It will be some other factor that is causing you to do that. So basically what he was saying is that the impulsion to do something, or the impulsion not to do something, or the reason why we ought not do something isn't because of the situation itself. It never is. So if you have a choice to go to work or not to go to work, just the fact that you have a job isn't a reason for why you're doing it. And it never is. It's always because of something else. It's always because, you want to pay your bills, or, you feel that work is, God requires you to work, or, the situation never provides the motivation to do things by itself, or any reason to do things by itself.
It's the plan versus goal dichotomy. Like, you're not going to work because that's the plan. You're going to work because of the goal to get the money to pay your bills with.
Yeah, that's kind of one thing. I mean, personally, I just think it's a case of if. It's kind of, well, because you can get an ought from an if, right? So if you do want to pay your bills, then you ought to go to work. Like, that works perfectly fine. But without that if you just say, hey, I've got to go to work because I have a job and stuff like that, well, that's not a reason to go to work. There's other reasons to do it. There's even other reasons, to, why'd you eat that strawberry? Well, the strawberry was there. It's a strawberry. It's a thing that's there. That doesn't give you a reason for doing it. There's no or to there. It's like, you like the taste. You want to feel good. You're hungry. The situation itself, just the is, never gives you an actual ought out of that situation. And when you look at these examples, it never will.
Maybe. I'm not entirely convinced on that one, but a different idea popped into my head. What if... Have you never done something for no reason at all? Like, when you mention the strawberry, weirdly it made me think of when my brother was really, really little. We shared a bedroom. We were standing in our bedroom, and our father was talking to us. And he just reached over and he grabbed like a wicker basket and he just crushed it in his hand. And my father was like, "Why did you do that?" And he just shrugged and went, "I don't know. I just did it."
Sure. But we're not talking about actions here. We're not talking about whether the action has any impulse that is or not. We're talking about the idea of judging whether we ought to have done the action or not.
Right, but what I'm getting at is, what if everything we do is like that, and the oughts are just justification? Like, I did the thing, but I'm actually rational because I can articulate a reason why it's a rational thing to do.
Well, you're sort of going into determinism here, sort of. So, the idea that you don't really make any decisions, you just do and then justify them afterwards, kind of thing. But even then, the situation itself doesn't give you an ought. The whole idea is that, hey, you can look back and you have these series of experiences which have led you to this what is the illusion of a choice. It's still not the actual situation that made you either do it or not do it. It's the sum total of all your previous experiences, how you feel at the time, brain chemistry, all of this different stuff. The situation itself doesn't actually give you any impulse to, like in this case of a trolley problem, either pull the lever or don't pull the lever. It doesn't give you that. It's the other things. It's the people on the track, your feelings about the people, the sort of all of this stuff. The actual situation doesn't tell you whether you should pull the lever or not pull the lever. It has nothing to say about it. It's all the things surrounding it that does.
Yeah, you have to drop a value proposition in there somewhere in order to justify an action.
Right. So the objective reality of people being on the track does not get you to whether you ought to pull that lever or not. You have to put something in there to be able to make that call to should you ought to pull the lever or not. It can't come from just the pure situation. And that's what he means.
Well, I don't know. The value imposition sort of thing, but I think you can get an external value. You can put an is on it and use that is as an ought. Like, if you... my brain's not in the right place to really explore this in the level of detail it needs to really get where I'm trying to go. But like, if you accept the external value that maximizing the benefit of human life is a good thing, then you could say there's 5 people on one track. That's a fact. Yep. There's 1 person on the other track. That's a fact. It is a good thing to protect as many lives as possible.
Sure.
That's an is. Therefore, you ought to pull the lever to protect as many lives as possible.
And what was the first thing you said when you described that example?
There is 5 people on the first track.
No. The very first word, when you did the entire example, the very first word.
I'm not sure.
Oh, you said if you accept that people are valuable. It's an if. You're not getting an ought from an is. You're getting an ought from an if.
That's a parenthetical statement, setting the frame for the hypothetical. Like, we could leave that off entirely, and I just say, there are 5 people on track A. There's 1 person on track B. It is a good thing to maximize human life. Therefore, you pull the lever to move the train. Like, you don't have to have that if statement on there, and you're still getting, you ought to do the thing. Well, now, you can argue there's a hidden ought in there somewhere, and maybe there is, but...
Well, I think there's a hidden if in there. It's sort of if you actually care about human beings. That if you do want life to be held with any kind of regard.
Well, I suppose, but on the flip side, I don't think that hypothesis is very falsifiable. Now, we're layers deep here, but
yeah.
I strongly suspect you can squeeze an if in pretty much anywhere. That's more about how creative your brain can be with finding gaps to put an if into, rather than there necessarily having to be one, you know?
Yeah, I would probably disagree. I think that a lot of things that we do are conditional on sort of ifs. If I don't really care about this thing, then I won't go and support it, like, and the fact that it's there, or, there might be a whole series of if statements. There might be if I don't like crowds, but if I do care about people, I might go to a protest. But if it more concerns me that I don't, then I won't. There's a whole series of things that govern whether we do something or not do something. And I think it does come down to a lot of sort of just prioritizing what our highest sort of wishes are, and that is sort of ifs. If we want this thing, then we will do X. If not, then we ought to do Y.
I think
that's okay. I get that, and maybe Hume would put it in a different way. So, but I do sort of understand where he's coming from, and I do kind of think that is the case, but I don't see that is as sort of, I don't see a problem with getting oughts from ifs. I don't have a problem with that. Like, I don't see why, because
that's kind of what I'm hung up on too, is I'm trying to figure out why this is a problem in the first place. And I'm trying to remember the context of how it came up.
It was just simply something mentioned, that you were engaging with somebody on morality, and they said, well, you can't get an ought from an is. And you don't need to. There's no need to go, well, people are in danger of this. You can say, well, I care about people and we're in danger of this. If you care about people, then we can agree this is what we ought to do. We don't need, to get an ought from an is. And if we can get it from an if, like, if you care about this, and maybe part of that is emotionality and empathy and reciprocity. Like, if you want to live in a world where you're not dragged out into the streets and vilified, then you ought not to do it to other people. We don't need to get oughts from ises. It's just unnecessary.
Yeah, because I'm
but a lot of times,
as an intellectual exercise, it's perfectly fine. But I'm like, there's I find I'm having
Yeah.
trouble. Like, I'm willing to devil's advocate anything, but I'm
Mm.
like, I'm not actually invested in this subject, though. I'm like,
Well,
it doesn't affect me emotionally. However, this turns out, I'm like, why is this? What
well,
brought this up?
it's leveraged a lot against atheists who say, "Hey, we ought to treat people well," kind of thing. And the theist will go, "Well, why in your atheistic worldview, if the universe is going to end, why would you ever treat anybody well?" And it's sort of like this, well, because it is the case that doing things, not treating people well harms them. And then they will say, well, you can't get an ought from an is, right? They will say you can't, you know, you can't get what you ought to do from people are going to be harmed. That is the case. And they're right, except that I care if people are harmed and I don't want that, right? Like that's perfectly fine to argue from, hey, it makes me feel like crap. I don't want that. So if I don't want people to be harmed, why would I do that? That's basically it. You can say if.
Okay, yeah, and that's yeah, because I'm like that ties into morality because then we get that whole how do you justify your morality business?
Hmm. Well, it's
Yeah.
funny because the theist will never say, well, that's God's nature. Well, you can't get an ought from an is. If that is God's nature, how are you getting the ought from it? Why should we follow God's nature?
Mm.
And they'll sort of say, well, it's the case. It is the case that if you don't, you're going to burn in hell. Well, that doesn't get you an ought. It has to be something else. So if you don't want to burn in hell, but it's amazing how often they don't apply it to their own sort of claims about morality, which is sort of hilarious.
Oh yeah,
Um, I do. Yeah, but I'm happy to talk more about it with you. That's totally fine. I probably should wrap up because I am way up. I'm so sorry, Ember. I only meant to go like an hour and a bit, but some of our lovely friends have sent stuff in, so I'll go through them first, and I'll go through the questions. So Robin Webster gifted 1 readership, and I can't remember who they hit, so I apologize, but I did say well done in the chat. Yahooligan member for 13 months. I hit the like button. What did you do today? Kind of aggressive, but hey, that's Justin. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it, mate.
True.
And Robin's wonderful as always. And Robin for $2 American in the old former Freedom Bucks. 2 of my favorite people. It's been a confusing time. Yeah, I can't imagine what you're going through, Robin. It's a train wreck from afar. I can't imagine what being in it is like. We've got Maximiliano Visha, I believe, is the name. But so Max V. I don't know. I like Max V. That sounds like a video game character, like really, or a comic book character. Maybe I like it.
I was thinking like a space launch, like Delta V is when you're changing velocity. Like this would be like Max V. Yeah,
Max doesn't want to be associated with Elon Musk, and as we don't want to be associated.
Space launches don't want to be associated with Elon Musk either.
That's true. So that went to Hi, Captain Butt. Okay. Michael N, Al Trucker, Purple Rhymes with Orange, and David Street. Some awesome people in there, Max. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Marty Cameo for 2 American dollary dues. Ember rules. Certainly does.
Aww,
absolutely.
Thank you, Marty.
Yeah, Marty, thank you. It's so good to see you. And Silver Phoenix Rising for $20. I love that name. I just got here. Hi, Mark and Ember. I want to encourage everyone to read Project 2025. That's the conservative agenda. J.D. Vance had a hand in writing it, and we all need to be ready. Knowing is half the battle. Totally agree. And, if you do sit down to read that document, be aware it's kind of depressing. It's very fashy. It really is pretty horrible. So I might get a link for it, but I kind of do agree that you should read it and be familiar with what it is that they're actually proposing. It's nice of them to sort of do a playbook so we can,
just show us all. Yes.
Yeah, to
now,
show us
it is
what their
900
actual
pages,
intentions are.
and that's
right.
It's like the Bible. It's freaking gigantic, and they're counting on that to people don't want to read it. There are versions out there. Absolutely, go check for yourself. You should have a copy to be able to reference specific sections and see exactly what it says. But there are a lot of creators who have made shorter versions that are easier to digest. Rebecca Watson, I think, did a summary version. There's a comic book version out there somewhere. I forget exactly where, but there's a bunch of different stuff you can find that makes it much more digestible than this 900-page monstrosity. But yeah, it's a thing we should all be at least broadly familiar with. Sort of like the Bible. Almost nobody reads the whole damn thing, but you really should be familiar with the gist of it. Because people are trying to make you live based on what it says. Kind of what we're doing here,
Oh, I do apologize. Purple Rhymes Orange, they just had a message in the middle that they weren't gifted a readership, unfortunately. It was Stoic that did. Yeah, Stoic, sorry. That's my bad. Sorry, Purple. Yeah, you had a message. Most of us turned up every meeting dressed that way in the middle of it, and I sort of read that one out because I can't read, apparently, which is ironic considering my last name. Okay, and one more in, but thank you so much, Silver Phoenix Rising. I really appreciate it. That is amazing. Thank you. Deviant Outcast, member 5 months. When life gets you down, because orange square, orange box.
When life gets you down because of an orange clown, come to Sweden.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. That would look even better if you're in traditional Swedish outfits. Like, weird thing is, in Perth, we had a Swedish immigration wave. I'm not even joking. This is true. So we've got this restaurant called Miss Maud's with the most traditional Swedish looking outfits, and you can recognize the girls and the guys from Miss Maud's anywhere in the city. Really weird. They do Swedish meatballs. They do all kinds of stuff. They're not bad, like I like them. They've kind of become a bit commercialized where they usually haven't. Fun fact, I've worked for them for a period of time. I didn't have to wear the uniforms because I was in packing and sort of in the back rooms, but yeah, big Swedish population in Perth. I bet you didn't know that, Deviant. But thank you, Deviant. Member for 5 months. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Now, we did have a few questions. First one is from Jess, our good friend Jess Droid. What does Ember have on the go in the distant future? Books, live talks, need the tea. Give the tea to Jess Droid.
Survive, not die, not end up in a death camp.
That is probably not distant. I would have that criticism, but
that's fair. That's fair. Actually, I do. Weirdly enough, I was thinking when I saw that go by in the live chat, I was like, I don't actually have anything along those, because everything's more immediate. Like, don't die, survive.
Right.
But as it turns out, Helen Green, who works with a bunch of organizations, including Recovering from Religion, reached out to me Monday, I think it was just before the election nonsense, asking when I could come back and do another RFRX talk. And so that's I think it's in January. I think I've gotten a little distracted the past few days, as you can imagine, but it is on the schedule. So yeah, I actually am going to do a talk in the medium distant future. And you can check out RFRX here on YouTube, Recovering from Religion on the website. I forget if it's a .com or a .org. And they have links for how you can join the talks. They do those every Monday at, I think it's 7 p.m. Eastern time. And yeah, they have speakers, and you can it's a Zoom call situation. So you can be there live, hear whoever's doing the talking, etc. And then later they'll air the recording of that on their YouTube channel. I'm not sure what my topic is going to be. They're probably going to make me come up with one, but it's a thing that's coming up. So yeah, Books, sadly, probably not so much because, like I was saying earlier, driving a truck and writing, not conducive. I do
Yeah.
have some scripts. I may do a short story here or there. I did an interview for the final episode of the current season of Transparency Talk, which I still have to finish editing, is with an author editor who's doing a book about trans love stories. And
Oh.
I may submit a story for that because I have a fantastic story.
Mhm.
The story I was telling earlier, in
Yeah,
fact,
yeah.
about the wonderful person in the shooting star and shit. If I can get that written up, I may submit it, but no books myself because I just do not have time. I'm literally working 7 days a week at this point, and it's going to get even worse after this weekend because I'm this weekend I'm doing my normal Sunday show because I promised Nitty, and then I'm just going to be working all the time. I'm driving, and when I'm not driving, I may do some writing as a freelancer, but I'm also like taking other work, and this was before the election. This isn't panic and get out of the country, I need money. It's I am literally screwed so heavily financially, and it's a whole long story with its own rant. But that's completely aside from the election. I have to work 7 days a week for the foreseeable future for entirely unrelated reasons. Yay. Yay capitalism.
Yay capitalism. Yeah. No, I don't think anybody's saying that except the 1% who are doing very well. But I think that, I don't give up on your channel. I mean, just drop some stuff in if you can,
Yeah, I'm not going to give up on it. In fact, I may end up doing more of the stuff I've been doing on Book of Ember, my second channel where I've been covering my transition stuff. I may end up moving some of that to my main.
Yeah.
I'd been trying to keep it separate because that's not what I want the main channel to be, but YouTube's been changing the rules for how you can live stream. And in order to do a full live stream, at least on mobile, which is what I'm on much of the time, you have to have over 1,000 subscribers. And Book of Ember is at like 86. So I'm like, if I want to do a full live stream, I may have to do it on main. So I don't know. But at the very least, there are still going to be the debate reviews over there. And every now and then, you never know when, I will have extra time and I will do a live stream over there. I may even someday get to do pre-recorded content again, but that may be a minute.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. But I really hope you will continue to do the debate reviews because that's like my favorite event of the week. To be honest with you, that's so much fun for me. So yeah, it's all about me, by the way, Ember. Like,
it's true. It's true. My Sunday shows existed as long as they have for Maya. Like, I enjoy doing them. I think it's important to platform other community members, to build community, to get us all interconnected and whatnot, to put myself out of a job. Because once everybody knows everybody else, you don't actually need me to do introductions. And we're kind of there in a lot of ways. I'm surplus to requirements. But the reason the show stayed on Sunday at the time it is literally because Maya asked. Because Maya was like, I like listening to you while I'm getting ready for my show. Like, it could have been in any other time slot. It is where it is because Maya asked. And so,
that's wonderful. Look, I am so clueless about social networking because, again, autistic, ADHD, neurodivergent guy. I will always need you, Ember. This is never going to be a case where I can navigate YouTube by myself. I always will. Don't worry about that. Like, I'm useless, like, really. Okay, enough hassling myself, I think. The next question is from Aunt Jer, who says, what are your kids up to? Go ahead and brag for a minute.
Well, I mean, the current nonsense notwithstanding, because try not to die kind of applies to them too. My oldest is having a mixed time. They're starting their career as an actual bona fide scientist. And, entry level, even as a scientist, isn't the best work as far as job satisfaction, but they're doing the thing. They're working as a scientist. Yeah, they're
money, yeah.
So yeah, that's they're also having some stress because their roommate situation is not great. There's there's a conflict between the roommate who's the main tenant on the lease and the landlord, and Adrian is just kind of like off to the side trying not to get evicted. It's very stressful. It may end up in court. They're not happy about it.
Yeah.
But they're doing the science, so it's not all bad. My son is mostly trying to get his freedom. He wants to like be able to live his own life, and I'm helping as much as I can. It's difficult because he lives with the other parent who, up until very recently, has actively roadblocked every attempt to help him in that way. But now that person is out of the way, actually asking for help. Like, so it sucks that it's taken so long, but it's great that it's possible now. And so we're working on that and having quality time mixed in, which is it's really great. They actually tried to shame me last weekend for spending time with them instead of getting work done. And I'm like, I will not be shamed for spending time with my child. Fuck you. And my youngest is probably having the best time overall because freshman year of college, got new friends, hanging out, doing cool shit. It's a long distance relationship, but this is the 3rd year of the relationship, so it's going pretty well. Overall, she's pretty happy, and I love to see it.
Fantastic. Well, lots of love to you and all the family. I think that's amazing. Just one more question from Sterling Nash. What sciences are Ember's degrees in? So what field?
Well, there's quite a few. I guess where do we want to put the cutoff on that one? I don't like to go into my degrees because I don't want to end up doing one of those argument to authority. I don't want to end up looking like Kent Hovind and being like, like the doctor in front of my name here is because we were doing a joke about Kent Hovind in the last debate review, and we're doing part 2 of that tomorrow. So I just left it there.
Look, even Kent Hovind doesn't want to look like Kent Hovind because he tries to convince everybody that he isn't the fraud that he actually is.
Yeah, it's true. But as for specific degrees, physics, astronomy, neurology, genetics, there's more, but those are the ones that I mostly used most recently. You know what? Let's just go with that. That's fine for now.
That's a lot of degrees. That's pretty good.
That's just the science ones. There's another reason I don't talk about it, because if I did go into all the details, it's a bit much.
Well, I'm amazed with the amount of the cost of education in the US, which is a whole nother topic. It's just, that's incredible.
That's one of the reasons I didn't finish law school. Like, that's another science, forensic.
Pathology?
No, just forensic science, because it was from my pre-law program. So it has to do with like criminal justice, crime scene stuff. It's not. It drives me bonkers because the way it's used in law is not how forensic is used in all the rest of science, but that's a whole other side topic. But yeah, I did finish a pre-law program. I got accepted to law school, and then I found out there's a cap on your student loans.
Yeah.
I did not know that. No one pointed that out to me until I ran face first into it, which is why I didn't finish law school and become an actual lawyer, which is really frustrating, but such is life. But that's why, because I spent over a decade chasing down every degree that I thought might be useful for something at some point, or just because I wanted to learn about it. And you would think, that would be a thing that you could do, is if you want to learn about a science, you should be able to do that. Not in the US. Nope.
Not even any, like, throughout the world, having a degree in something doesn't guarantee you a job in that field, unfortunately. That's just, the way it is.
Yeah, that's true. My first my first bachelor's was in physics, and
Mm.
I wanted to go work in physics, but unfortunately, my kid's other parent refused to leave the area, and the only physics jobs in our area at the bachelor level were at the nuclear power plant.
Mm.
And we have a very leaky nuclear power plant, so I wasn't super comfortable with that. I'm like,
No, that's
shit.
understandable.
Yeah, I'm like, either I
Yeah.
need to get a master's and a degree in education in order to become a physics teacher,
Mm.
or I need to go do something else. So,
Yeah.
you know.
No, that's totally understandable. You shouldn't be putting yourself in harm's way for, we should have safe standards for things, and safe workplace environments for people. I think that's the bare minimum that people can expect out of an employer. I mean, it's wild that you don't. But I do apologize. That was the only questions. And I've kept you so long. I've gone like an hour over my usual time because when you get Ember and I together, and I really apologize, when you get Ember and I together, the conversation could go forever, like, quite frankly, and probably will if I don't wrap it up. But Ember, thank you so much. You are a delight. You're an amazing person, and you are one of the best friends I have, and I unequivocally absolutely adore everything about you. I love that you are embracing who you are. I 100% support you, and I'm so sorry for all of everything you've had to go through. I wish we lived in a better world.
Same, but you know what? One of the reasons that I think you and I are such good friends is not just because of the intellectual curiosity that we share about so many different things, the love of reasoning, and so on and so forth, but because underneath all of it, I think we both believe we can make a better world.
Well, I think I can help. I would like to help. I think I try to help. I'm not sure how useful I am, but I try. And I think it's the trying part that's the important thing to me. I don't mind failing. I don't want to come to the end of my life and go, well, I didn't even try.
Right, right. Well, I mean, we could get into what do we mean by failing? Like, sure, we don't become dictator of the world and force it to be better, but like, is what we think, is it better if we have to declare it by fiat, because we're capable of being wrong too.
No.
Everything we do has an impact on other people around us, and they have an impact on people around them because of the way we influence them. I don't think it's possible to live our lives without changing the world.
Yeah, no, that's true. But have you got anything else to add? Anything coming up that people can be made aware of?
Less than I used to.
Okay.
Which makes me really sad because like I want to do more. I want to build things up and I have to cut way back because I have to work 7 fucking days a week for the foreseeable future, which is really depressing when I think about it. But I do have some stuff coming up. Again, debate review part 2 with Ian Chen tomorrow on my channel. This coming Wednesday is the second to last transparency talk with Dr. Ben. That's super fun. And then
cool.
Assuming I can finish the edit, 2 weeks from then will be the episode that I was talking about with the author editor Michelle, which is also a fun talk, but I do have to finish editing the dang thing. Let's see. Transpositions is still happening on Thursdays. I'm kind of in the wind on it because I have to work through both the time I would normally record and the time we normally broadcast. So I don't know how that's going to work going forward, but it is still a thing that exists. And there's probably more, but...
Oh, Niddy's on your channel as well. I'm just looking at it now.
Yes,
Niddy's on your channel.
Sunday.
Sunday Eastern time. Yep.
The season finale of Atheist Lives is Niddy's going to be on. Yes.
Niddy, I got to talk to Niddy as well. That reminds me. Beautiful. All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and a big thank you for Ember for great. Oh, Eric just sent something in. Eric, you're a scamp and a rascal. Eric Wanda gifted 5 readerships on the outro. They went to your mum. Ian Chen official, congratulations, Ian. That's deserved. Tinker Phil, Mandoop, A Lito 84. Congratulations, winners, everybody. Enjoy your emotes and other benefits. Thank you so much, Ember. Just a pleasure. And don't forget to be kind to yourself. Let's be kind to one another. If people are important to you, be kind to one another. And I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.